Thank you. This is Immerse, the podcast and book. We are delighted to have you join us. Immerse is produced by Charley Morrow, Sean McCann, and Bart Plantinga for Morrow Sound, Vermont and Helsinki, and Recital Edition, Los Angeles. Immerse.
Something is wrong in the land.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the greatest show on earth.
Here we go. Okay, so this is Charley Morrow for Immerse. I'm Charley Morrow, and today I'm pleased to talk with my longtime friend and co-conspirator of public events, Chris Wangro. We met through the New York City Department of Parks, where he just had been hired as events coordinator. My colleagues and I in the New Wilderness Foundation were producing one of our summer solstice celebrations in New York's Central Park. Chris, at the time, the early 80s, had just returned from working in Europe with Henry Cow. We've continued to the present to make things happen. Chris, he started out as the ringmaster of a one-man circus and rose to become the tsar of special events for the city of New York in the 1980s. These days, he works as a creative strategist and activist who pursues the improved design of public space, employing placemaking, community-building strategies that are enhanced by his passion for bringing people together in joyful, dynamic, and unexpected ways all across the globe. Chris is renowned for his masterful designs of public space and has produced countless prestigious events for audiences, from intimate ones to massive ones, including festivals, cultural programs, presidential summits, NASCAR rallies, papal visits, Dolly Parton concerts, pachyderm parades, and art festivals worldwide. The one we did together was broadcast internationally. Nice to have you with us today, Chris.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the greatest show on earth.
So, hey man, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. What I'm doing is I'm writing a text on immersive experience, and clearly one of the traditional and contemporary forms of immersive experiences is circus and events. Well, the whole idea has been to totally engage people.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I always find funny about this stuff, you know, people talk about sort of immersive experience and interactive experience as if it's like just was invented. Like this is what people have been doing forever. So, you know, the terminology changes, some of the tools change, but the game remains the same.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I wanted to talk to you about what you do, because you've bridged. You know, you've started out as a one-man circus. You have done performance, you've done music, and you've done large events. You've done electronic events. We've done events that had, conceptual bases. We've done things that had broadcast links, so they became very technical. And, I just want to talk basically about, the immersive stuff that you do and that we have done together. In a way, this discussion is a description about our mutual interest in engaging people with sound and media and themes and so forth. As you say, it's ancient, but it always has to be done in the present. Well, I'll ask you some questions. I think we're already getting material. Our conversation has already been in the subject, and we both agree that this is an ancient thing, but it brought us together. And I wondered what you think are the raw elements of a good circus, just to start out with. I mean, what makes that circus happen when you did it as a one ring circus? I mean, how did you figure out your package and make that work?
I think there's, when I think about the raw elements, I'm trying to think of in what way it's raw elements. I mean, you can look at a list of raw elements as being things such as humor, music, spectacle, color. That's one list of raw elements. But you could also look at another list of raw elements that might be clowns, acrobatics, animals, those things that sort of signify circus and separate it from some other forms. I think for me, and the way I thought about circus, it's a little bit of both. When I was doing circus, I sort of came to it twice, Charles. I was totally into magic and circus as a junior high and high school kid. I was for sure the nerdy 14-year-old doing magic tricks for 10-year-olds. I did, play poker in school with a bunch of friends of mine who were all sort of into card sharping, and we all would try and, do magic for each other, and it was completely above board and part of the game to deal seconds and from the bottom of the deck. It was sort of part of what we thought was cool. I thought circus was really cool, and I met someone who, I was doing magic shows professionally, as it were, as a kid, and then I met someone who had been a clown in Ringling, and he started teaching me clowning, and I developed this very sort of clown magician character, and that was a very big part of my youth. I then got really into the sort of happenings and avant-garde performance stuff, and that was going on. This was mid-70s, so that was all around me, and from there, I sort of moved away from circus, did all sorts of sort of so-called experimental kind of performance work, and music, as you know. And then, I kind of got sick of the people that I was working with in Europe, and particularly because the political work that we were doing was all sort of very political and socially motivated, but it was very heavy-handed. It was very sort of, our performances and our music was very like, hey, I'm going to hit you over the head, wake up, motherfucker. And I felt that just wasn't a way to get to the audience. And so one thing led to another, and I started the circus. I went back to the circus and started my show, which I felt was, hey, this is a perfect way. This is a perfectly populous kind of tradition in which we can include social and political messaging, but do it in a way that I can talk to people who are way outside of my political norm and my social beliefs, and yet the list of things that we mentioned before, the spectacle, the color, the humor, the clowns, the animals, the music, form a bridge between us and them. And so that was sort of the big motivating factor for me starting a show. And I will say, too, that the iconic elements of the circus, for instance, an acrobat or a strongman, lend themselves beautifully to become metaphors. So that I think one of the beauties of the circus in its heyday, of the Great American Circus, is you might see things that you've never seen before, such as a bunch of acrobats standing five tall, one on top of another. That set new goals and new ideas in your head, showed you new ways, new things that were possible. The circus was exciting because it showed possibilities. It inspired awe and wonder. We wanted to use that same language to inspire awe and wonder and show possibilities, but of a different nature. And that the strongman or the acrobat that was climbing up a tower in our circus climbed up a tower of books. This was a perfect metaphor for the importance of reading and education. Those types of things went across the board in terms of our creating what our circus was like.
That's marvelous. In a way, it suggests something, too, that the technology and the props followed from the idea, but within the envelope of what it is that circus is. That's what I'm getting, that you have a genre which works, and then you work within it, but then the details of it are shaped to however you're making a piece, and that's...
And the genre in this case was completely inspiring. It's like being taken by the idea of creating music for a marching band. But the marching band genre is like, hey, this is fun, this is great, I can create a marching band, that'll be wonderful. And then the tropes and the standards within that genre, be it 3 to 4 time or whatever it is, become the motivator for you to discover new things and new ways of communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for laying all that down, because one of the things I'd be comparing in my study here of immersive entertainment, it's like virtual reality. My friend Jaron Lanier's material will be in the same book with us, and his own revelations about creating worlds technologically and then working with them. It's a quite different matter than starting out with the circus, because he's there.
I mean, the thing that I find, and I know Darren for years as well, and it's off to him for everything he's done and accomplished. I feel like with the huge difference between something like the VR world and the circus world is our world was, in the world that I've played in, I'm not a VR guy, is very real. It is the opposite of virtual reality. It is reality. One of the things that's important about seeing a circus live is that there is somebody there flying above you, and that person could crash and burn. There is a tiger in that cage. That is not a tiger on the 2-inch screen or on a visor that makes you feel like it's real. That tiger could kill that guy. That tiger could get out of that cage. You can smell it. You can feel it. When that tiger roars, man, you're like, whoa, that's some serious shit, right? And
yes.
I have yet to feel that reality experience translates into VR. As you know, I spent a lot of years producing concerts. And whether that concert is for 5,000 or 500,000, you cannot duplicate the experience of being surrounded by thousands of people dancing together in VR. You can get a cool experience in VR, but it is not the same. In my contention, others may not agree. But, and as much as I'm fascinated by the technological equivalence of reality experience, I can cite examples of things that are losses for virtual experiences and technological experiences replacing the real ones.
Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking by kind of by extension. There's been a number of events that I've been involved with, and friends of mine have done that were involved immersion in water. Max Newhouse had a water whistle that he did at NYU in a swimming pool. I did the concert for fish. There's a Finnish band that performs entirely underwater, and a Danish theater group. And I keep on thinking, in a way, the milieu is very, very important. The medium is the message in this case.
Well, the medium is, like many things, the medium allows you to do things or inspires you to do things. I mean, even, your conch shell orchestra, the music that you created with the conch shell leads you to not only new sounds, but new people to collaborate with, and new places to perform, and new meetings from those performances. I mean, it all comes together in a way that, it would. Now, I'm sure that's true of the virtual world. The idea that you might be able to create a virtual gathering place for people from around the world to meet, merge, and mingle, and perhaps hear music together, that's all cool. That's great. But it is a very different thing.
It really is, and but I think we've got you've put your finger on it, and I think what has been most meaningful has been if there is a reality element to it. I think otherwise, it reminds me of something my father once said. You may recall that both of my parents were shrinks, and my father was talking about the difference, between paranoia and fear. He says, when you're paranoid, you're imagining that there might be a tiger in the room. And he says, with fear, there is a tiger in the room.
That's right. And I mean, not to get us off on a tangent, because I think there are more interesting things and more relevant things to talk about. But, one of the conversations I've had over and over again with people is about elephants in the circus, and animals in the circus in general, but elephants being the elephant in the room. There's a lot of people that think, yeah, it is great, it is fantastic that, elephants are being phased out of the American circus. I consider it a tremendous loss. For me, the importance of the audience, kids in particular, being able to look into an elephant's eye, to be able to stand there like I did as a kid, and I'm sure you did.
Yes.
Look up and go like, whoa, not only is this animal big, but this animal has soul. Look in that eye, right?
It's true.
Feel the animal, right?
Yes.
And, yeah, I understand that we should be nice to our animals, and we should take care of our animals, and and most of the circuses that I ever was in and on around, the animals were utterly babied because, of course, they're somebody's livelihood and they cost a lot of money. So to me, it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. We should take care of the animals, but not having that animal, real, live, and in person, in a space shared by humans, is a real loss. And it's a real loss to our ability to preserve those animals, because without seeing them for real, how can you really even begin to treasure them and understand them? Anyway, that's a tangent. That's a tangent. We're probably better off focusing on other things. So keep us on track. I dare you.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that one of the important reality parts of all of this is the activating of space and awareness of time. And the feeling, time, place, and space are important ingredients. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Feeling, time, place, and space. Well, I mean, from an audience perspective,
yes,
or the presenting perspective?
Well, try audience first, and it comes back to you as a presenter then.
I'm going to start with the presenter side.
Okay.
I was just recently, as a presenter, for me, most of my life has been creating events of one kind or another in unusual spaces. I mean, I've certainly worked in hundreds of theaters around the world, but, what really made me, what really made my so-called career was the ability to create performances and spectacle in places as, disparate as, whatever, as disparate as some giant field outside a seminary or the top of the Brooklyn Bridge. It's using unusual spaces as your canvas. And just recently, I was in Charlotte, working with the director of the Arts Center down there, and they're putting on a festival. And he was walking me around downtown Charlotte, showing me the various spaces that they use and how they've used them in the past. And so I had that momentary rush, which I think is exactly what you're talking about, of standing in the space and looking around. This is a place I've never been to before in the middle of the downtown district. He's saying, well, we closed up the street here, and we put the stage there, and we have the lights here. And for me to begin to feel that space, as I have so many times before, to look at it and think, right, I wouldn't do it that way. I'm going to put the stage here, or I might think about putting this in the round. Oh, I see that there's a flat top roof that's a story and a half up. We could actually put a band there or a projection screen there. And I'll turn around here. There's a really interesting place where you could actually put a second stage or a second performance area and begin to really understand the space and how the dynamics of that space can be brought to life to create a performance. I think there's a real excitement to that when you do it and do it right. I mentioned my friend Michael Lang produced Woodstock, and he and I did a bunch of work together. And Michael's been great at that. Michael and I have gone to some pretty wacky places, including Ramallah and others, where we've gone to look at spaces where festivals might occur. And Michael's very keyed into finding space that makes for a wonderful event site, an event site that nurtures the artists and the audience. From an audience perspective, I think that, I always say to people I'm working with, even if you're doing something as traditional, if you will, as a concert, an outdoor festival like a setting like Central Park or something, the theater begins as people walk in the door, right? The transformation of that space and the transformation of their everyday experience happens as soon as people arrive. And you have to address the thing that way. The show doesn't start when the show starts. The show starts when people get there. And the show doesn't end until they've actually left your venue. And so there's all kinds of things you can do to bring that to life and make it exciting. I mean, in a small and simple example, I used to run a concert series in Bryant Park at Castle Clinton. People would stand online for hours to get tickets because they were free tickets. We would hire local buskers and street musicians, sometimes some semi-famous people. We would get to do it and just perform for people online. As soon as they got there, the experience was rich. It was fun. It was different. It was outside of their everyday. But, we've done all kinds of things. In the circus, going back to that example, it's traditional to do something called a walk-around. People get to the circus. Of course, traditionally, it's a tent, and it smells different. It looks different. There's all sorts of stuff going on. You are literally entering a different world. But, we used to walk around was a great guy. The science teacher was his day gig, and he had all these tremendous snakes. He was a tightrope walker with us. And we would walk around. He played sax, I played bass clarinet. We walk around with these giant, massive, disgusting snakes around our necks. And we'd be doing, free improv horn solos through the audience, like boas around our necks. That was like right away, that changes everything for people who are in the audience. Is that a good answer? Is that addressing the type of thing?
That's fabulous. It's absolutely true because, like some of the people I'm going to be including this discussion of are architects who will be talking about what it means to site a building, which goes right back to the combination of sensibility to site a grotto for a ritual or whatever. So you've gotten into the core material.
As you know, I'm now working with architects and urban designers and landscape architects on the development of public space. And I say the same thing to those folks is, this is all about the transformation of everyday experience. People walk in the door and they walk onto our property. How do we make them feel like they are in a different world? And what does that world signify, or broadcast to them? I mean, classically, there are parks that make people feel like they've entered an urban oasis. They walk in and it's green and it's quiet and there are benches and there's a tree canopy and that's one thing. Or there are parks that feel like they're really fun. You walk in and there's a playground and there's a band playing and there's baseball or whatever it is. Those are two opposite ends of the spectrum, but it shows the different types of places that you can create, and everything feeds into that. I entered this field of programming of parks and strategizing parks from a programmatic perspective. But what's happened is, at least I've become, when I say programmatic, I mean programmatic in terms of what types of events might you do there, what types of public art might you do there, right? But now it's much more broad, and it's come to include things like, what kind of furniture would you put in the park? What kind of paths would you put in? What would the overall design and shape be? Because all of that broadcasts the kind of experience that you're creating. I guess you could say a park is an ultimate example of an immersive environment.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. I mean, you were in Central Park for the beginning of the time when I met you, and when you follow Olmsted and read about the way he started with making parks, I mean, you must know the history of, that he had shepherds in Brooklyn and so forth. So he was a bit of a P.T. Barnum, but of park making, and he was...
Absolutely. He certainly knew how to get work, too. I tell you, incredible how much work he accomplished in his life. It's really impressive. How much of it is beautiful.
Yeah, he's a very positive character compared to Barnum.
I think Barnum gets a bad rap. Barnum helped invent showbiz as we know it, and he also helped, to tell you something you know, but on record, on tape, he not only helped invent showbiz, he helped invent showmanship and, what was turned into PR and advertising. He was genius. Maybe he was ingenious. He had just the natural knack for it. And he was also a very active and engaged citizen. Not that I agree with all his policies, he was very into temperance, for instance. But, I read numerous books about Barnum, and the most enlightening is the book that collected his correspondence. And one of those I'll never forget was, he wrote in a letter to one of his friends, the true purpose of culture is to get people to be as unselfish as possible. And I thought that was really great. That was really interesting.
I think these are all very important points. I think you've covered the main part of what I'd wanted to hear from you, because I think that you've come down to the point that through performance, through siting in a location, through what you create for people, you then transform time, place, and all is then in the palm of your hand as a designer. Maybe more permanently if what you're doing is arranging a park space and so forth. But I think that
the other thing that you're not mentioning, I'm not saying you're not considering it, but the other thing you're not mentioning, which one has to take into account in their creation of an event, as well as in the creation of a public space, is that ultimately you are building community. And that's part of the joy of it. part of the joy of going to a great concert where everyone is dancing together is you will always be part of that community. And it doesn't matter whether there are 50 people together for a birthday party or there's 500,000 people together for a concert. Once you've shared that experience with everybody, you have that basis. And if it's a good experience, which frankly most events are, that you've created a bond and broken down some walls that exist between people. Or maybe you haven't even broken down walls, but you have created a bond. And creating the bond is just super important, especially in a world like we live in now, where people are very busy building walls. Gives us an opportunity to be the bridge builders.
Those are magnificent thoughts. I totally agree. I mean, we come from the same bedrock. The reason I was doing events was to bring out, experimental music into public spaces so that people could experience it and happen upon it or have it be part of what brought them together. That's why all of the, I never charged for the events that I did or and I would break down
for the circus we did. It's the same. We are definitely cut from the same cloth. Not the most self-sustainable puddle, but yeah, you'll probably relate to this. And it's interesting about experimental music and such. I was listening utterly by chance to an interview by Fred Frith, of Fred Frith, and someone asked him about the difference between performing in traditional spaces versus performing in non-traditional spaces, and performing written music versus improvised music. He was saying, if you're in a traditional space and you're playing written music, you generally have an idea before you go into that space what you want that music to feel, to sound like, and maybe to feel like. And you are struggling with that space that someone else has preconceived to have a certain kind of sound profile and experience profile. You're struggling with that space the whole time to try and get as close to your notion of what it should be as possible. But going into a new space, especially playing improvised music, it is all about, it is a moment of discovery the entire time. The key to improv being completely in the moment and trying to discover and make the most interesting or the best or the most whatever sound and experience as you can. And I think that is both for artist and audience. I think if you go to Carnegie Hall to hear X, Y, and Z play, you have a certain conception of what it's supposed to be. If you walk into the bowels of the Brooklyn Bridge tunnel system to hear Charley Morrow and his orchestra play, and you know a lot of it's going to be improvised, you're there for the ride, right? You are there to experience it moment by moment and see what it is. And it's a very different type of experience than going to hear something you know in a place you know.
Yeah, brilliant. That's absolutely the motivation in order to have that feeling and have that feeling together with your performers and with your audience, and that the
it unites your audience and your performer in a way that perhaps much written music doesn't. Not that written music can't, but it's a different way.
Yeah, very definitely so.
It could be. I guess you could say that. If you go to a concert and you're going to go see your favorite band, and your favorite band launches into their big hit, and everybody puts their phone above their head or their lighter and they wave it back and forth, and everybody sings along. And you've been waiting for that moment to happen, and you're at the garden, and it's friggin' awesome. That's great. You're getting this incredible shared experience, and you're getting exactly what you wanted, exactly what you paid for and expected. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's a very different kind of thing than going in with no real notion of what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, also impromptu events, unannounced events, present themselves as an interesting area. I mean, I think we both of us known bands and been part of groups that have done the unexpected. Could you speak a little about impromptu, unexpected guerrilla events?
Yeah, I mean, that's as you say, I'm smiling because I think it's very true. It's really taking people to a place they didn't expect. And I think, how it is, you'll find, again, both artists that are particularly gifted or clever about how they do this, and audiences that are particularly willing or unwilling. I think that you as a guerrilla performer can completely shake people up, and sometimes people go along for the ride and they enjoy it. They'll participate in some ways, and they'll be incredibly, let's say, appreciative, joyful about your disruption of their everyday. I shouldn't even just say disruption. I'll go back to that word, transformation of their everyday. And that's really fun. And then you get the people who put up their walls, who are defensive of their everyday. Like, don't mess with me. Right? You can't. Don't do this here, please. I'm shopping. I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing in this location. What are you doing here, you wacky performer? It's like they can't let go of their everyday, or they don't want to. I guess they're entitled. And again, I think one of the reasons I went from sort of hard-edge street performer, avant-garde guerrilla theater kind of thing that I was doing in the early 80s or the late 70s to more of a circus kind of clowns and jesters and we're playing happy music kind of guys, is because it was easier to break down the walls. It was easier to reach the people that didn't want their everyday messed with. It was easier to talk to those people and sort of have them at least meet you halfway and hear what you had to say, if you could do it within the guise of an art form.
I find that it's parallel to something else that you do, which is very interesting for me, where you have made musical instruments, and suddenly from raw materials there is an expressive device.
Yeah. Well, I like making stuff, and I like instruments, so it's natural that I would do that. I love that. And I have a lot of friends who are really, really talented, gifted, and skilled instrument makers at this point. So I feel like I don't even get to touch their home. I don't get to talk about this. But it's almost like doodling what I do in comparison. But as a doodler, it's great fun, and it's great fun to bring materials to life and to explore what you can do and what you can make with them. And I think if you incorporate those types of materials and those types of instruments and those types of things that you can make into performances, there's a certain kind of delight in that for the audience because they see it too. It's sort of, it's that thing where you say, oh, I get it. You could take this old bicycle wheel that I thought was trash and combine it with this with this broom handle and somehow make great music out of those two things. That's really fun. I love that because it's all friendly and it's a lot more approachable than an oboe. Where if you're not familiar with an oboe, and you look at it and you think, what is that? How do I play that? What is that? Most people you talk to, Charlie, you know this. Most people you talk to, even people who listen to music a lot, could not listen to a recording and say, oh, that's an oboe. Oh, that's a trombone. Oh, that's an alto sax. So if you don't put hands on and spend the time, really exploring this stuff, you just don't know.
You know what? My mentor is a guy named Jerry Rothenberg, a poet who's brought me into his life, where he spent a lot of time with the Seneca Indians and a lot of tribal people. I spent years learning about rituals, and one of my favorite rituals concerns the longhouse tradition of the Seneca people, where everybody shows up to the longhouse, which is basically the ceremonial joint. And a musician, by the way, in that tribe has to know all the right songs for the right days and the right functions and so forth. So it's a huge thing about memory and having that passed down to them from their fathers and grandfathers, and it making a recognizable Seneca culture. And then what they do is they make a soup for several of these at some of their major events, and everybody gets some of the soup and they take it home with them, and that soup then becomes part of the afterlife of that event.
And do they cook the soup at the event?
Yes, that's it. The soup is making the soup as part of the event.
I mean, it's sort of like a metaphor made real. It's like the metaphor comes alive. What we do when we make an event is you're making soup, and everybody takes a bit of it home, and it lives on with them. As it is, in fact, with our lives. We live, and people meet us, and we go away, and people carry bits and pieces of us forward. I love the making soup. reminds me a little bit of the bread and circus guys who, bread and puppet, who made bread at most of their performances, so everyone could break bread together, take a bit home.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I think that you've covered what I've, the full arc here, because I would remind you that when we first met each other, we walked the site of a solstice performance that I was going to do in Central Park, and we both had this sense of how to site everything on a site and whether a site was appropriate and how the sun would be seen and so forth in Manhattan Henge. And I think that we've covered this full range that reflects our own relationship, because we've walked sites, we've done events, I've provided technical services to more organized events. You've built instruments. We've jammed together. The range of things we've done is just wonderful. Yes, let's.
I think there's long lives of doing this kind of work. I think the other thing that's interesting about you and me, dare I say it, is that we've remained independent. And I will say that since I started, and even in the commercial world of event producing for, whether it's municipalities or arts organizations or corporate organizations, I've always worked as an independent. And that is, at least in our corner of the universe, in the USA, in New York in 2019, it is increasingly difficult, it's not nigh on impossible to be an independent. That all of this work is being done outside of artistic circles, right? Outside of artists who are creating events. All the other sort of event producing work is being done by people who are connected to some kind of company. And I feel that's a loss, because there's a sort of, look, let's say there's an art to what we do. There's a science and there's an art, and we combine the two. And the art of what we do is less emphasized within the corporate and company structure.
Well, I totally agree with you, and I think you're making an excellent point. I'd like to maybe from this conversation think of some things that we might be able to do together by telling you about some of my new work. I've gone from making soundscapes electronically to be able to make moods. I discovered that the same way that in a movie, you can create moods sonically, we have created a natural sound masking for working spaces. Say our inspiration to do something better is the use of white sound, white noise, peaked where conversation is in order to mask it, so to speak, going back to Disney's idea that you have a water feature in a theme park because that calms the place down as well as giving moisture. But we've discovered that we can tune those notes, and we mix natural sound with the shaped white noise dynamically. And so that can be used in a workplace or in a museum and so forth, or in a park to create mood. So, for example, we're doing a terrible museum in Lithuania that's at the site of a massacre. I mean, there are no Jews left in Lithuania, and this is where they were all killed. And so when you come in there, it's a subliminal thing where we build up the terror until you finally get to the point where you're right where the trucks were when everybody was shot like fish in a barrel. And so we can use tones like that. I would take you back to a moment in history which you maybe heard about, which is that the German Signal Corps used to keep 50-cycle hum on, an irritating hum during Hitler's great moments in large stadium. And as soon as the Fuhrer would speak, they'd tend to cut the hum off, so people would suddenly have a...
I've never heard that. That is...
They were good, when they were bad. So I would love to work with you on some things where my sonic skills and knowledge of history and shaping experience from my tool set and your tool set could be used together. So anything we can dream of, tiny or grand, I have the chops to make it happen between myself and my associates.
We've always had a good time working together. It's funny because, I'm actually producing an event now. I haven't produced an event in years and years and years. I got asked to do something in Bryant Park called World Without Walls, which is a big event bringing people together from many cultures, musicians from many places, in a spirit of collaboration and cooperation as opposed to division and fear.
Well, one thing is for sure, I'm tied up with my integrator who who's located in Pasadena and in Brooklyn, who can do any size events. He designed the studios at Juilliard. You got to meet him. He's a cool guy. His name is Willie Fasteneau. He's in his 30s. And he's the successor to everything I'm doing. And he's installed our stuff in hospitals. He's co-designing our stuff for planetariums. And he's really smart. He's a musician. He's an excellent businessman. And he's designed some stuff out in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, big halls. I think you would dig him. He's the reason I can live where I want to live, design ideas, and all of that, because he's actually carrying out all the work with all of his people everywhere, all over the world, so that I can be an idea man and a musician.
Well, I'd love to meet him.
Love to see you, and love to, I enjoyed our hanging out. You're one of the few people in my life that we've actually gotten to really hang out and jam now and again. And these have been moments. When I talk about place and time, I think there's something very special about shared time when you really are in it. Something completely unique happens.
Yeah. I have a very traditional perspective of time. I'm not very interesting when it comes to that. But I think it is really true that, if I didn't have that very traditional perspective of time, that this notion of time being very elastic and different is underscored by the things of saying, okay, well, the experiences that we've had, those times they're larger, they're different than the passing of time that passes every day. The clock ticks, tick, 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 and then certain things happen. And they're really important. They take an emphasis. They create a memory. They create an understanding, whatever it is. Those times are different than, not all time is created equal. I don't know. I'm having a hard time expressing it because, of course, talking about time is difficult. But, yeah, people that you can create special time with, you should make sure that you do.
You've done something wonderful by bringing together all these energies in the two of your lives to produce this third character who is just remarkable.
Well, I hope it continues that way. All right, bud. Take care of yourself. We'll talk to you soon. All right?
Okay, well, thank you, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks.
Right.
Take care, Charles. You will.
You will. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. This is Immerse, the podcast and book. We are delighted to have you join us. Immerse is produced by Charley Morrow, Sean McCann, and Bart Plantenga for Morrow Sound, Vermont and Helsinki, and Recital Edition, Los Angeles.
Immerse. Immerse. Immerse.
An empty shell to fall back into the sea.
Sound, light, space, 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 space.